Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of the Concession Stand here on the KB Radio Network. And this is the review of the season 2 premiere of Disney Plus Marvel Studios Loki, which just premiered on Disney Plus this Thursday night. And we are back. We're back in the TVA where Loki and Morbius and Hunter B 15, I think, and a new character, OB, are racing against time. This is a long time coming. It feels like we've been waiting forever for season 2 of Loki to drop, and it's finally here. And we have been experiencing ever since the first season of Loki, the MCU has kind of been on a downward spiral. As far as the films and even some of the TV shows are concerned, it hasn't lived up to expectations. And Marvel needed a win. They really, really need a win. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is, notwithstanding, that was probably the best thing to have come out in this current phase of the MCU. But I mean, aside from that, what else? What else has been universally loved out of the MCU? I can't think of anything. But I do remember the last thing that everybody was all on board with, and that was Loki season 1. And everybody loved that show, including me. And I was so worried for this second season because of the quality of everything else that has come out in the past year and a half. And so we dive back into this world of just pure chaos that Loki season 1 left off with. And it picks up right where we left off. In case you don't remember, Loki and Sylvie had confronted He Who Remains, who was played by Jonathan Majors, and Sylvie end up killing He Who Remains, which caused the timeline to branch and cause all this chaos. So it was unclear what happened with Loki because Sylvie had kicked him through a time door and he was back at the TVA. But unbeknownst to him, it wasn't the same TVA that he left. And so it was really unclear where he ended up. Was he in a different timeline? Was he in a different universe? We didn't know. It just went off. And so it left with this big giant cliffhanger with the statue of He Who Remains, or King the Conqueror, in the middle of the TVA, as opposed of the timekeepers that were initially there when he left. And he runs into Morbius and B-15, and they don't recognize him. They have no idea who he is. And so it was like, okay, he must be in a different universe. That was my initial thought. He was in a different universe. Well, that question was quickly answered as soon as we got into this show. And this episode, which was entitled Ouroboros, who is the character of Kiwi Kwan, we find out very quickly that Loki is not in a different universe or a different timeline. He is actually in the past. To put it more amply, he is 400 years in the past. And mind blown. So at this point, the TVA hasn't went through their little, I guess you could say, rebranding. Instead of the timekeepers being the head honchos, it was the actual man behind the scenes of Kang. And so we see statues and murals of Kang all over the TVA, giant statues and whatnot. It's unclear just how far back Loki had traveled and how he even got there, but it's clear that the show is instantly setting up roots for the present timeline story. While running through the TVA of the past, Loki discovers more truths about the TVA. In particular, we find out that the character Renslayer was once more closer to Kane than initially thought. Now, if you're a comic book lover, you know that Renslayer does have a connection to Kane. And so that was never addressed in season one. We see that we're going to dive into it this season, which is pretty awesome in my in my humble opinion. And so we leap into the past, and he sees the entire TVA is in meltdown, it and is briefly reunited with Sylvie. The series is dropping hints here and there, and given the nature of this show and the way it plays out in the time, playing with time travel, it'll no doubt make the show more enjoyable as we continue on throughout this season. In this first episode, we get introduced to some new characters that we didn't see in the first season. We get Judge Gamble, who is played by Liz Carr, and General Dex, who is portrayed by Kate Dickey. And the most notable addition is the character of OB, who is portrayed by, get this, Academy Award winner Kiwi Kwan. And I loved him in this show. What an addition. And I'm so happy for this man. I don't know what it is about Kiwi Kwan. Maybe it's the nostalgia of it all, growing up and seeing him in the Goonies, seeing him in Temple of Doom and all that. I just love him, but this new renaissance of his, with Everything Everywhere All at Once, and now this American Born Chinese, he has really come back in a major way. And this role here, just going off of this episode, completely enjoyed it. I mean, he was born for this role. It's like they wrote this. Well, of course, they wrote this strictly for him, but it's like it was tailor made for him. You know what I'm saying? He just fits in this universe. He fits in this world. And the character of OB is such a charming, smart. It was just Kiwi Kwan. When you think of Kiwi Kwan, it is the character of OB. It's weird to explain, but I loved it. I enjoyed it, and he was so entertaining with his comedic timing and the banter between him and Owen Wilson, and also with Tom Hiddleston. He wasn't intimidated. He really stole the scenes that he was in from these two great actors. And so man, hats off to him. He owned this episode. There's no wonder that the episode was named after his character. So let's go through a quick recap of what happened in this episode. We jump right back into the action. As I said before, Loki appears in a TVA in the distant past where he beats up with Morbius and B-15, who doesn't recognize him and don't know who he is. And they send people after him thinking that he's an intruder. Since we know that the TVA has been hunting Lokis for a while now, the curious fact that they don't even recognize him should tell us how far back that Loki had went. We find out later that it was 400 years. In trying to escape the TVA agents, Loki jumps out of a window onto this mail cart vehicle that crashes into one of the buildings, causing one of the time monitors to fall and crack this tile floor. There we see Casey from the first season, who doesn't recognize him as well and sends more agents to apprehend him. But before they can arrive, Loki time slips. This was a trope that went through the whole episode. He time slips again. Now he's in the present. Now, with Loki time slipping in the TVA, this is an impossibility. This is something that has never happened in the TVA, but it's happening nonetheless. Loki asks our present day Casey how long has that floor been cracked on the ground? Because he thought he had went into another universe, but he looked over at the floor and saw that the towel was cracked, where he basically it was his fault because he caused the monitor to crack the floor. And Casey tells him, look, it's been like that as long as I've been here, as long as I can remember. And that's when it dawns on him that he was in the past. Throughout the episode, we encounter a few scenes like this where characters seemingly have gaps in their memory, where Loki is convinced that it is Kane who has wiped all of the TVA employees' memory multiple times. While Loki jumps back and forth through time slipping, Morbius and B-15 are still reeling from the revelation that they are all variants. We learned that in season 1 in the season finale. B-15 is firmly against pruning the time branches now that she knows that she could be from one of them. She comes to the realization that we're killing people. We are pruning innocent people, and if it's not for, I guess, dumb luck, it could be her, or somebody she loves from that particular timeline, because she was ripped out of that timeline at some point. So she wants to tell the employees the truth, or her employers, should I say. So herself and Morbius are called into the war room to talk to Judge Gambit and General Dax. B-15 makes an impassionate plea not to prune the new timelines. As everyone in the room is a variant, she tells them, like, you're a variant. We are all variants. She begs them to reconsider, and her efforts are rewarded when Judge Gambit decides that she was right and orders all TVA agents to stop pruning timelines. But General Dox is upset by this request. Meanwhile, Loki in the distant past realized through a recording device in the war room that Renslayer and Kane were once very close, with Kane calling her a marvel. I got a kick out of that, and saying he will be proud to lead with her. So they are very close, if you know what I'm saying. When he time slips back in the present, he reveals that they should be aware of the oncoming threat. He shows everybody in the war room the truth about using the time stick when he, pruned the wall. And it shows this Muriel, that was once the timekeepers, but once he pruned the wall, it revealed Kane. He's finally reunited with Morbius, and he tells him everything that had occurred when him and Sylvie went to the Citadel and met He Who Remains. And this was kind of it was kind of hard for Morbius to believe. He doesn't buy what Loki is saying. He knows Loki is telling the truth about it, but it's just something that is hard to believe or wrap his head around, should I say. And so the pruning was all a part of avoiding more versions of Kane, who would eventually try to conquer. Notably, the TVA has been having power surges all through the episode, and when Morbius tries to find Miss Minutes for help, Loki warns him that she is also on Kane's side. And so that was a good little nugget to watch out for later on. Now, if you've seen the trailer for the season, you know that Miss Minutes do come back later on. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And so the two decide to go to the repairs and advancement department in the TVA, which is deep in the basement. And this is where we find OB. And OB has been down there for hundreds of years, and 400 years to be exact. And while they're talking, Loki had time slipped again while he was talking to him, and OB was kind of outdone by that. Oh, that's when we find out it's time slipping, because OB was like, "Oh, He time slipping." And you're like, "Oh, so you've seen this before?" And he's like, "No." And so we flash to a scene where Loki had time slipped to the past and talk to OB from 400 years ago. And so they're talking, and while they're talking, the OB in the present is remembering the conversation. It was just a good way to transition into that. It was a good way to kind of explain that way time was working with this time slipping thing. It was just unique. Not really unique. I think that's the wrong word, but it's a smart way. It was just a smart way to do it. And I appreciated the show for that. And so they devised a way to kind of stop it and all this. There's a bunch of convoluted stuff in there, and I'm not going to run through, but it was more of a race against time to, prune. Loki had to prune himself, and uh, Morbius had to simultaneously go into this little temporal uh, radiation thing and fetch him out. Oh, I guess you could say, but if he's in there too long, his skin will get ripped off and all this stuff. And so it was a race against time. But at the end of the day, it worked. Of course, it was the first episode. We knew nobody was going to die, but it was a very heightened sense of tension there, for a minute. But it was a really really well done episode. It's not the greatest episode in television history, but it was a good introduction into this new season of Loki. I really enjoyed this, and we have a lot to look forward to moving forward. You know what I'm saying? With Loki and him going after He Who Remains or King or Victor Timely or whatever variant of King there is, because there are many of them. And so it's going to be fun to see Loki go on this adventure. I I'm enjoying this. I enjoyed this. Good start to the season. I'm happy with the performances thus far. Kiwi Kwan, Owen Wilson, Tom Hiddleston, the actress who plays B-15. I really, really enjoy her in everything she's in. Can't think of her name, but I enjoy her. She was in oh my god, Lovecraft Country. There was another movie that she was in. It was on Netflix where she plays this uh African immigrant staying in his house, her and her husband, and I think the house was haunted or something. I forgot what it was, but she was good in that too. She's good in everything I've seen her in, and she's really good on this show. This is gonna be fun. This is gonna be fun. We have new showrunners this season. I was kind of upset by that because I'm of the frame of mind, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But you know, so far so good. It's only a sample size. It's only one episode, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. We could keep this tone and this pace. We're in for a treat. And so fingers crossed. I think we're I think we got a good one. I think Marvel is on the uptick. And if you go by some of the reviews of critics who have seen the first 4 episodes, who are raving about the 4 episodes that were showed to them, we're in for some good stuff going forward. But I'm with all of you. I'm not privy to that, and so we all get to see it all together. And this first episode, I feel, was a winner. As always, I'm not going to grade this episode. I'm gonna wait to the end of the season, and we're gonna grade it as a whole. But I can tell you that I enjoyed. I would like to know, how did you feel about the first episode of season 2 of Loki? Let me know by email, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You could also look me up on all social media platforms. Just look up the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about us over on YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this review of the first episode of season 2, Loki, currently on Disney Plus. Can't wait to speak to you next week when we review episode 2. Until then, I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love everyone. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.